In today's video, I'm going over 7 ways to boost your emotional intelligence. Yes, emotional intelligence, or EQ, is something that we can actually increase. It's not just a personality trait that you're born with or without, but it does require work. It requires a commitment to becoming more self-aware and more intentional in how you interact with your emotions and the emotions of others. And it can absolutely be developed. It's one of the most important things that you can do for your relationships, your career, and your own mental well-being. So before we dive into the 7 ways, let's quickly define what emotional intelligence actually is. Psychologist Daniel Goldman breaks it down into 5 key components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And unlike IQ, which tends to be more fixed, EQ is adaptable. It can grow as you grow. Every time you reflect, pause before reacting, listen more carefully, and respond with intentionality, you're strengthening your EQ. That being said, let's jump into the first way to boost your emotional intelligence. The first way is by naming your emotions. Being able to accurately name your emotions is incredibly important and requires a surprising amount of self-awareness. And you might think you're already good at this, but people often confuse emotions with thoughts or behaviors. For example, someone might say, "I feel like people don't care about me." That's not a feeling. That's a thought that's contributing to the feeling of hurt. Or someone might say, "I feel like I'm going to fail my exam." That's also a thought, not a feeling. Others confuse it with a behavior and say something like, "I feel like punching something," but that's an action or an impulse, not an emotion. Typically, emotions are one word: sad, happy, mad, surprised, disgusted, excited. So generally, being able to recognize the actual feeling is what matters most. Now, there are a lot of feelings and you don't have to memorize every single one of them, but it does help to have a broader emotional vocabulary. You want to be aware of the basics, for sure, but if you really want to take your emotional intelligence to the next level, you should expand beyond just angry or sad. Learn words like inadequate, skeptical, inquisitive, playful. These give you more clarity and allow you to describe your inner world with more accuracy. This is where tools like the feelings wheel come in. Generally, you want to start in the middle of the circle with the basic core emotions and then work your way out to more nuanced ones. That said, you don't need to know every emotion in the book. You don't want to get paralyzed trying to name the exact emotion every time. Just having a richer emotional vocabulary helps you become more attuned to yourself and ultimately to others. Now, if you really want to level up, don't just name the emotion. Identify how it shows up in your body. Ask yourself, what does this emotion feel like physically? For anxiety, it might be rapid heart rate, a tightness in your chest, tension in your shoulders, or that sinking feeling in your stomach. For happiness, it might be lighter muscles, a sense of energy spreading throughout your body. For anger, it might feel like pressure building in your chest and neck, like heat rising from the bottom up. Every emotion has a physiological fingerprint, so to boost your EQ, get specific. What emotion am I feeling, and how does that manifest in my body? Having this skill helps you regulate your emotions more effectively, and it gives you a better chance of responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. The second way to boost your emotional intelligence is by leaning into unpleasant feelings, which then leads to long-term growth. So now that you can identify your feelings and know how they manifest inside your body, the next step is to not immediately try to get rid of them just because they're uncomfortable. Many of these emotions will be unpleasant, but that doesn't mean they're bad or something you need to eliminate. Sometimes they are a sign that something is off, yes, but a lot of the time they're actually signs of progress. Let's take anxiety as an example. Imagine you're about to give a speech or walk into a job interview. You feel tension in your body. That anxiety is an indicator that this matters to you. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and that's a good thing. Of course, there are situations where anxiety is a red flag and it's appropriate to remove yourself. If you're in a place that feels unsafe or someone is making you feel genuinely threatened, your body is signaling that you need to get out, and that's something to listen to. But not all discomfort is dangerous. Sometimes you feel uncomfortable right before doing something that's really good for you. Let's take the feeling of tediousness, that mental friction you get right before doing something like chores or going to the gym. You feel resistance. You want to avoid it, but emotionally intelligent people learn to lean into that feeling. They don't wait for motivation or ease. They understand that pushing through that moment of discomfort is part of the process, and doing that over and over expands your comfort zone. It strengthens your self-discipline, improves your confidence, and leads to more opportunity both personally and professionally. The third way to boost your emotional intelligence is to accept that you don't know something. Our egos hate this. We want to seem like we're capable and confident all the time. So when someone asks us a question and we don't know the answer, our first instinct is to make something up or give an answer that sounds good just to maintain control of the other person's perception of us. But that usually backfires. You end up giving a response that doesn't make sense or falls apart under scrutiny, and you end up looking more foolish than if you had just been honest. Emotionally intelligent people aren't afraid to say, "That's actually outside my wheelhouse." They know that admitting they don't know something doesn't make them less valuable. It makes them more trustworthy. But let's be clear, this isn't about avoiding responsibility. Saying "I don't know how to do this chore" doesn't give you a pass to sit back and do nothing. That's not what we're talking about here. This is about acknowledging the limits of your knowledge in an honest and respectful way. And paradoxically, that mindset makes you more competent in the long run. When you say "I don't know how to do this," it creates space to ask a follow-up question. Is this something that's meaningful enough for me to learn? If so, where do I start? Protecting the ego prevents learning. It tries to protect your image in the short term, but it sacrifices real growth. Admitting what you don't know lets you be foolish in the short term, but wise in the long run. The fourth way to boost your emotional intelligence is by genuinely apologizing. And I don't mean just saying "I'm sorry" just to get it over with or to check some box so the conversation can move on. I mean really admitting that you were wrong in your behavior. This usually applies in interpersonal situations with a partner, a friend, a family member, and it's not easy. Again, it requires putting your ego and pride to the side. It means valuing your connection with that person more than you need to be right. And that's a really hard thing to do because apologies are vulnerable. They require you to face the reality that you hurt someone, and no one wants to sit with that. But just saying "I'm sorry" is not enough. A genuine apology has multiple parts. First, it names what you did wrong. Second, it communicates how that action hurt the other person. Third, it lays out how you plan to act differently moving forward. And fourth, and this is the most important part that most people miss, the best apology is behavioral change. If you can follow through with all four of those, the other person is more likely to take you seriously and, more importantly, to trust you in the long term. A rushed apology, one that just is meant to patch things up quickly, often does more harm than good. It signals that you don't really understand the impact of what you did, or that you just want the discomfort to go away. Emotional intelligence means you slow down, take responsibility, commit to change, and implement such change. The fifth way to boost your emotional intelligence is by showing empathy without assuming extra responsibility. A lot of people think empathy means jumping in to rescue someone, solving their problems, or emotionally carrying what they're going through. But that's not empathy, that's overstepping. Empathy, at its core, is about connection, not control. And the most emotionally intelligent people are able to care deeply without losing themselves in someone else's pain. They know that being supportive doesn't mean becoming responsible for fixing or absorbing what someone else is feeling. There are different types of empathy. Cognitive empathy is when you intellectually understand what someone is going through. Emotional empathy is when you actually feel the other person's emotion in your body, almost like you're feeling it with them. And compassionate empathy is when you feel moved to help, but the help is grounded, thoughtful, and respectful of boundaries. All three are valid, but emotional intelligence lies in knowing how to use them skillfully and knowing when it's not your place to take over. You can express empathy through words, yes, but you can also express it non-verbally through your facial expressions, your posture, your tone, even the way you sit and breathe when you're with someone. Sometimes a soft nod, eye contact, and quiet presence says far more than any advice ever could. And the people who are most emotionally intelligent understand this deeply. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to absorb someone else's feelings in order to care. You can just sit with them in the moment without rushing to get them out of it. That's not passive, that's powerfully active. perspective, because holding emotional space for someone without trying to change their experience is one of the most healing things you can do. It says, I'm here, I see you, I won't run away just because this is hard. Emotionally intelligent people recognize when their role is to witness, not to solve, not to rescue, and that awareness allows them to stay grounded in themselves while still being fully present for others. The sixth way to boost your emotional intelligence is through metacognition, which is just a fancy word for thinking about your thinking. And this skill is massive because the beliefs we carry largely influence our entire emotional reality. If your internal narrative is filled with catastrophic predictions or rigid all or nothing statements like, I always mess things up or nothing ever works out for me, your nervous system responds to those thoughts as if they're absolute truth. Your body reacts with tension, anxiety, and dread. And even if none of those thoughts are actually accurate, they feel real, so you start behaving as if they are. Emotionally intelligent people don't just sit back and let those thoughts run wild. They ask questions. They challenge their inner dialogue. Is this thought 100% true? Is there another way to look at this? Is this thought useful for how I want to feel right now? They don't get trapped in their heads all day long. They're not constantly dissecting every sentence their brain produces, but they know when it's time to pause, especially in moments of emotional overwhelm or high stress. They know how to step outside the thought, almost like a researcher observing data. They don't immediately react to the thought, they evaluate it, and in that pause, something powerful happens. That gap between thought and action creates space for intentionality. They can choose to respond in a way that reflects their values instead of their fear. They can calm their body before speaking. They can say, I'm not going to follow that thought all the way down the spiral, and instead redirect towards something more grounded. This ability to pause, observe, and re-engage with clarity is at the heart of emotional regulation, and it's not about suppressing thoughts or emotions. It's about knowing when to challenge them so they don't lead you somewhere where you don't want to go. The seventh way to boost your emotional intelligence is to live a values-congruent life instead of a goals-driven life. We've been taught since we were kids that life is about achieving. Be this, do that, win here, succeed there. We're constantly asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if our worth is defined by our job title or how much money we make. And while goals are important, many people attach their identity and self-worth to achievement, and in doing so, they lose connection with what actually matters to them. They start living in a way that's dictated by external expectations, not internal values. Values are personal. They're things like integrity, kindness, diligence, curiosity, humor, and playfulness. Living in alignment with your values gives you something that goals never can: peace of mind. And the best part, living in alignment with your values is fully in your control. You don't have to wait to achieve something. You can embody your values today. If you value kindness, you can be kind now. If you value courage, you can speak up now. You don't have to wait for some future milestone. Emotionally intelligent people use values to guide how they pursue their goals. And even when two values clash, like assertiveness and kindness, they know how to choose one without being incongruent with the other. For example, they may choose to be assertive in the moment and not kind, but they won't be disrespectful. They still hold on to who they are, and that's what creates a deep sense of self-trust. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and see you in the next one.